The great hall of Nexus Prime stretched far beyond what human eyes could easily see. Captain Jack Morrison stood in the center of the chamber, his hands clasped behind his back, his uniform pressed and perfect. Around him, 47 different alien species sat in curved rows that rose like a massive amphitheater. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of pure light. All of them stared down at him with expressions he could not read. Beside Jack stood Ambassador Kate Sullivan. Her face was calm, but Jack could see the slight tremor in her hands. She had fought for 3 months to prevent this moment. She had argued, pleaded, and presented evidence. None of it had mattered. The High Chancellor Orin floated above them all. He was an ancient being made of golden energy, his form shifting and pulsing with power. When he spoke, his voice echoed through every corner of the vast room. "Humanity stands accused," Orin said. "The charges are grave. You have expanded too quickly across the stars. You have shared your culture without permission, changing the ways of other species. You have built weapons that violate our sacred treaties. Most dangerous of all, you refuse to share your technologies with the Council, keeping secrets that could threaten us all." Jack wanted to speak, but Kate touched his arm gently. "Not yet." A reptilian creature rose from his seat. His name was Vexthor, and he belonged to the Saurian people. His scales were deep green and his eyes were cold and yellow. He had led the case against humanity from the beginning. "The humans are dangerous," Vexthor said, his voice sharp and cutting. "They arrived in our galaxy only 200 years ago. In that short time, they have claimed 30 systems. They have built a military fleet that rivals species who have existed for thousands of years. They develop new weapons every decade. They cannot be controlled. They cannot be trusted." Kate stepped forward. "May I speak?" Orin gestured with one glowing hand. "The accused may present their defense." Kate's voice was strong and clear. "Everything Counselor Vexthor says is true. We have expanded quickly. We have built a strong military. We have developed new technologies. But we have also saved lives. When the Telesian plague struck, it was human doctors who found the cure. When the Zephyr stations were attacked by pirates, it was human ships that drove them away. We have been good neighbors and loyal friends." "Friendship is not the issue," Vexthor interrupted. "The issue is danger. Humans are aggressive by nature. Your own history shows endless wars on your homeworld. You fought each other for thousands of years before you reached the stars. What happens when you grow bored with your 30 systems? What happens when you decide you want more?" "We have never attacked another species," Kate said firmly. "Not once. Not yet," Vexthor replied. "But you have the power to do so. And that power grows every year. The Council cannot allow a threat to exist unchecked." Jack felt anger burning in his chest. They were being punished for potential crimes, for things they had not done. He looked around the chamber, trying to find friendly faces. The Telesians looked sad. A few other species seemed uncomfortable, but most showed no emotion at all. "We have reviewed all evidence," Orin announced. "We have heard the arguments. Now the Council must vote. The question before us is simple. Should humanity be exiled from the galactic community?" Kate spoke quickly. "Your Honor, exile is too extreme. If the Council has concerns, we can discuss limitations. We can agree to inspections. We can slow our expansion. Please, there must be another way." "The vote has been called," Orin said. "There is no other way." Lights began to appear above each Council member's seat. Jack watched as one by one they made their choice. Red meant exile. Blue meant humanity could stay. The red lights outnumbered the blue ones 3-1. Even some species that humans had helped voted red. "The decision is made," Orin declared. "Humanity is hereby exiled from the galactic community. You have 5 standard years to abandon all colonies and stations beyond your home system. All human vessels and structures outside the orbit of Jupiter will be destroyed. You are forbidden from using faster-than-light travel. A blockade will be established around your solar system. This blockade will remain for no less than 200 years. Any attempt to break through will be met with complete destruction." "This is the judgment of the Council." Kate's face went pale. Jack felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. 200 years. Everyone in this room would be dead. Their children would be dead. Their grandchildren would be dead. Humanity would be trapped in their own solar system for generations. "You cannot do this," Kate said, her voice breaking. "We have done nothing to deserve this." "You exist," Vexthor said simply. "That is enough." Guards approached, alien soldiers in dark armor. They were here to escort Jack and Kate from the chamber. As Jack turned to leave, he looked back at the Council members. He memorized their faces, their species, their cold expressions. Kate leaned close to him as they walked. "This is not the end," she whispered. "This is only the beginning." Jack did not respond. He could not trust himself to speak. The rage inside him was too strong, too hot. As they left the great hall and entered the corridor beyond, he finally spoke. "They made a mistake," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" Kate asked. "They wanted to lock us away because they were afraid of what we might become. But now they have given us time. 200 years of time with no distractions, no diplomacy, no rules. They think they are protecting themselves. But they are creating the very thing they fear." Kate looked at him with tired eyes. "What are you saying?" Jack stopped walking. The guard stopped too, watching him carefully. He looked at Kate and spoke with absolute certainty. "I am saying that we will use these 200 years. We will build. We will grow. We will become stronger than they can imagine. And when we return, they will regret this day. They will regret it with every fiber of their being." The guards pushed them forward and they continued walking. Behind them, through the walls of the station, Jack could see Earth in the distance. His homeworld looked small and blue and fragile. Soon a wall of weapons and ships would surround it. His people would be prisoners in their own home, but prisoners had time to think, time to plan, time to prepare. 200 years seemed like forever, but Jack knew that for a species as stubborn as humanity it would be enough. It would be more than enough. The first ships arrived at Earth 5 years after the Council's judgment. They came from 30 different star systems carrying millions of people who had built lives among the stars. Now they were forced to return home, to a planet that was already crowded, to cities that had no room for them. Ryan Fletcher watched from his office window as the transport ships descended through Earth's atmosphere. He was the newly appointed director of something called the Unity Project. His job was to coordinate the return of humanity's scattered colonies and somehow find space for everyone. It was an impossible task. Earth had 8 billion people already. The returning colonists added another 2 billion. Food became scarce. Housing was non-existent. Fights broke out in the refugee camps. Some people talked about giving up, about accepting that humanity's time among the stars had ended before it truly began. But Ryan had other ideas. He stood before the United Nations Assembly and spoke words that would change everything. "We are one species," he said. "One people. For too long we have been divided by borders and nations and old grudges. The Council has given us a gift even if they do not know it. They have given us a reason to unite completely. No more countries. No more separate armies or governments. From this day forward we are the Terran Commonwealth. One world. One purpose." The vote took 3 months, but eventually every nation agreed. The flags came down. The borders dissolved. Humanity became a single entity with a single goal: survival and revenge. Dr. Emma Chen worked in a laboratory deep beneath the surface of Mars. Her team consisted of the best scientists humanity had ever produced. They had one mission: develop technologies that the Council had never seen, could never predict, and would not know how to stop. "The blockade uses traditional detection methods," Emma explained to her team. "They look for the energy signatures of our old engines. They scan for the radiation patterns of our old weapons. So we build new ones. Engines that do not use traditional faster-than-light travel. Weapons that do not produce conventional energy signatures." It took decades. Emma grew old watching her theories turn into prototypes, and her prototypes turn into working systems. She would never live to see them used in battle, but she did not need to. She knew they would work. In the dark reaches beyond Neptune, in the frozen Oort cloud where the sun was just another star. Admiral Ben Torres oversaw the construction of a fleet unlike anything humanity had built before. The ships were sleek and deadly, made from materials that absorbed sensor scans instead of reflecting them. Their hulls were black as space itself. "How many do we have now?" Torres asked his second-in-command. 400 capital ships," came the reply. 2,000 frigates and destroyers. 500 carriers. And the weapon systems are beyond anything the Council has. Torres nodded slowly. He was an old man now, but he had been young when humanity was exiled. He remembered the humiliation. He remembered the helplessness. Those memories kept him working 18-hour days, kept him pushing his crews to build faster, to build better. The blockade around the solar system was maintained by automated platforms and patrol ships that came by once every few years. The Council had assumed that humanity would need decades just to recover from the exile. They assumed wrong. Senator Claire Madison stood before a gathering of 10,000 people in New Chicago. Behind her, massive screens showed images from humanity's time among the stars, the colonies they had built, the friends they had made, the Talesian children whose lives had been saved by human medicine. They took this from us, Claire said, her voice amplified across the crowd. They took our future. They took our freedom. They imprisoned us in our own home. But they made one critical error. They left us alive. They gave us time. And we have used every second of it. The crowd roared its approval. This was the new generation. Children born after the exile who had never seen another world. But they had been raised on stories of the injustice. They had been educated to the highest levels, trained in combat and strategy, taught about every species in the galaxy. They were humanity's weapon, sharp and focused and ready. 2 centuries passed. People lived and died never knowing anything but the solar system. But none of them forgot. Every child learned about the exile in school. Every city had monuments to the colonies that had been abandoned. Every family had stories about ancestors who had lived among the stars. The blockade began to fail in the 287th year. The automated platforms were old, running on technology that had not been serviced in generations. Ships stopped patrolling as often. Gaps appeared in the coverage. Ben Torres was long dead, but his grandson, also named Ben Torres, now commanded the fleet. He watched the sensor readings that showed the weakening blockade and smiled. He had inherited his grandfather's memories, his grandfather's rage, and his grandfather's patience. Not yet, he told his officers. Let them forget us completely. Let them think we are gone. When we emerge, it will be as ghosts returning to haunt them. 4 more years passed. In that time, humanity built faster. The shipyards in the asteroid belt worked day and night. New soldiers completed their training. New captains took command of the dark ships waiting in the Oort cloud. Dr. Emma Chen's granddaughter, also named Emma, ran final tests on the quantum drives. Unlike the old faster-than-light engines, these left no trace, no trail, no signature that could be detected. A ship could cross the galaxy and no one would know it had moved. Ryan Fletcher's great-great-grandson, a man named Henry Fletcher, now led the Terran Commonwealth. He stood before the Council of Admirals, the group that had replaced the old national military commands. The question is not if we return, Henry said. The question is how. Do we return as conquerors seeking revenge? Or do we return as liberators seeking justice? Admiral Torres the Younger stood. We send scouts first. We learn what has happened in the galaxy during our absence. Then we decide, the room agreed. Revenge was sweet, but blind revenge was foolish. They needed information. 3 months later, a single ship slipped through the decaying blockade. It was small, fast, and completely invisible to the old council sensors. On board were 12 people led by Commander Alex Carter. Their mission was simple: see what the galaxy had become, learn everything they could, and return home. As the ship accelerated away from the solar system, Alex looked back at the sun. It was the first time in nearly 3 centuries that a human had left their home system. The weight of that history pressed down on him. Take us to the nearest former colony, he ordered. I want to see what they did to our worlds. The ship vanished into the darkness between stars, leaving no trace of its passage. Behind it, the solar system waited. Inside that system, billions of humans prepared for the day when they would emerge. Not as the frightened, divided species that had been exiled, but as something new, something stronger, something the Council had created through their fear and their cruelty. The long exile was ending. The return was beginning. The ship called Nightfall moved through space like a shadow through water. Commander Alex Carter sat in the command chair, watching the screens that showed absolutely nothing. That was exactly what he wanted. If the sensors showed nothing, it meant no one could detect them. Approaching the Talus system, Lieutenant Maya Foster said from the pilot's seat. Should I take us in? Slowly, Alex replied. Stay on the edge. I want to see what has happened here before they see us. Talus, therefore, had been one of humanity's closest friends before the exile. The Talesian people were peaceful and kind, their culture built around art and music. Human doctors had saved millions of them from a plague that would have wiped out their species. Alex remembered the stories his grandmother had told him about the Talesians, about their gratitude and their sadness when humans were forced to leave. What Alex saw now made his stomach turn. The beautiful crystal cities that the Talesians had built were in ruins. Massive industrial complexes covered half the planet's surface, belching smoke into the once clean atmosphere. Orbital platforms surrounded the world, each one bristling with weapons. Ships moved between the platforms, ships marked with the symbol of the Saurian Empire. "Are those slave ships?" Maya asked quietly, pointing at vessels that carried thousands of life signs packed into tiny spaces. Dan Wright, the intelligence officer, worked his console rapidly. "Scanning their databases now. Give me a minute." Alex waited, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. This was not what he had expected. The council was supposed to be about peace and cooperation. What was happening here? "Got it," Dan said, but his voice was shaken. "The Talesians are a tributary state. They mine resources for the Saurian Empire and pay 90% of everything they produce as taxes. Those are not slaves, technically. They are workers being relocated to mining colonies on the moons. But effectively slaves," Alex said. "Yes, sir." Alex took a deep breath. "What happened to the council?" "The Galactic Council that exiled us?" Dan pulled up more information. What he found painted a dark picture. The council still existed, but it was nothing like the organization that had judged humanity nearly 3 centuries ago. The Saurians had consolidated power slowly over the decades. They had used bribes and threats to take control. Now they ran the council like a dictatorship, with themselves at the top and everyone else beneath them. Species that resisted were crushed. Species that cooperated were exploited. The ideals of peace and justice had been replaced by oppression and greed. "There is more," Dan said. "Something about a new threat from the galactic rim." He pulled up reports that had been marked as classified. The encryption was strong, but not strong enough to stop technology that was 3 centuries more advanced than theirs. Alex read the reports in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. "They are called the Devourers," Dan explained. "A hive mind species. They showed up about 50 years ago and started consuming everything in their path. Entire star systems have gone dark. The Council's response has been pathetic. The Saurians are more interested in fighting among themselves than dealing with the real threat." Maya turned in her seat. "Sir, if these Devourers keep advancing, they will eventually reach the core worlds. They will reach Earth." "Not if we stop them first," Alex said. "But we need more information. Dan, I want you to access the Council's complete archives. Everything. Military capabilities, fleet positions, political structure. Everything they know about the Devourers. Everything they have on humanity." "That last part might take a while," Dan said. "Their records on us go back centuries. Then start with the important parts. I want to know what they said about us after we were exiled. I want to know if they have been watching the solar system. I want to know what they think happened to us." Dan worked for hours while the nightfall drifted silently at the edge of the system. What he found was shocking in its arrogance. The Council had barely thought about humanity at all. They had assumed humans would spend the 200 years struggling to survive on an overcrowded Earth. Some reports suggested humanity might have destroyed itself in wars over resources. Others predicted that humans would become a primitive species again, forgetting their technology and their dreams of the stars. Not a single report suggested that humanity might have been preparing, that they might have been building, that they might return stronger than before. "They forgot about us," Alex said with something like wonder in his voice. "They completely forgot we existed." "There is something else," Dan said. "Something you need to see. It is about our exile." He pulled up classified files from 290 years ago, internal council communications that had never been meant for public view. Alex read them carefully, his expression hardening with each sentence. The charges against humanity had been manufactured. The evidence had been falsified or exaggerated. The Saurians had orchestrated the entire thing because they feared human innovation and military potential. They had bribed and blackmailed other council members to vote for exile. The trial had been a sham from the beginning. "We did nothing wrong," Maya whispered. "They punished us for nothing." "Not nothing," Alex corrected. "They punished us for being a threat, and they were right to fear us. They just did not realize that exiling us would make us an even bigger threat." He stood from his chair and looked at the screens showing the enslaved Talesian world. "We have seen enough here. Dan, mark this system for liberation. Maya, take us deeper into council space. I want to see their military installations, their fleet positions, their weaknesses." For the next 3 months, the Nightfall traveled through a dozen systems. Everywhere they went, they saw the same story. Oppression, corruption, exploitation. The galaxy that humanity had been exiled from no longer existed. This new galaxy was darker, crueler, and desperately in need of change. They watched Saurian warships destroy a merchant vessel for failing to pay protection money. They saw species that had voted for humanity's exile, now suffering under Saurian rule themselves. They documented military bases, weapon platforms, and fleet concentrations. They also found old human colonies. The buildings were ruins now, reclaimed by nature or torn down for materials. But in some places, monuments had been left behind. Memorials to the humans who had lived there, created by grateful species who remembered the good that humanity had done. In the ruins of a medical facility on Zephyr Station, Alex found a plaque. It read, "In memory of the human healers who saved our children. We will never forget. They remember us," he said quietly. "The people remember, even if their leaders do not." When the nightfall finally returned to the solar system, Alex went directly to Admiral Torres with his report. The old admiral, who had waited his entire life for this moment, listened to everything without interrupting. "So the council is corrupt," Torres said when Alex finished. "The galaxy is suffering, and they have no idea we still exist." "Oh, that is correct, sir." "And the devourers? A real threat. If we do nothing, they will eventually reach us. But the council is too weak and divided to stop them." Torres stood and walked to the window of his office, looking out at the military shipyards that stretched across the asteroid belt. Thousands of ships waited there, dark and deadly, ready for the order to move. "We built all of this for revenge," Torres said. "But what you are describing is not a situation that calls for revenge. It calls for something bigger." "What do you mean, sir?" Torres turned back to face him. "I mean that we have a choice. We can destroy the Saurians and make them pay for what they did to us. That would be satisfying. Or we can do what we should have been allowed to do from the beginning. We can be the heroes this galaxy needs." Alex felt something shift inside him. He had spent his entire life preparing to fight, to take back what had been stolen from humanity. But Torres was right. The galaxy did not need more conquerors. It needed liberators. "The Admiralty is meeting in 2 days," Torres said. "Present your findings to them. All of them. Let them see what we are facing. Then we will decide together how humanity returns to the stars." Alex saluted and left. As he walked through the corridors of the military command station, he thought about the Talesian children working in mines, the species suffering under Saurian rule, the advancing threat of the devourers. Humanity had been exiled unfairly, that was true. But now they had the power to make things right, not just for themselves, but for everyone. 2 days later, the Admiralty voted unanimously. It was time. The fleet would emerge, not just to reclaim humanity's place among the stars, but to fix the broken galaxy that had been left to rot for 3 centuries. The return was beginning. The first strike came without warning. 3 Saurian military bases in the border regions went dark simultaneously, their communications cut, their defenses destroyed, their garrisons eliminated before they could even sound an alarm. By the time the Saurian High Command realized something was wrong, the attacking fleet had already vanished. Fleet Admiral Ben Torres watched the reports from the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution. The ship was massive, 3 kilometers long, covered in armor that could absorb energy weapons and shrug off missiles. Around it, 50 other capital ships waited in formation, each one a masterpiece of human engineering and 3 centuries of focused rage. "All 3 targets confirmed destroyed," reported an officer. "0 friendly casualties. The enemy never saw us coming." Torres nodded. "Phase 2. Send the message." Across the galaxy, every communication channel suddenly carried the same broadcast. It showed Torres himself standing in his uniform, his expression hard but not cruel. Behind him, the symbol of the Terran Commonwealth glowed. A blue Earth surrounded by stars. "People of the galaxy," Torres began, "for nearly 3 centuries you have forgotten us. You exiled humanity from your community because you feared what we might become. You were right to fear us, but wrong about what we would become. We return now not as conquerors, but as liberators. The corrupt council that exiled us has enslaved you, exploited you, and abandoned you. That ends today. To all species suffering under Saurian rule, help is coming. To the Saurians themselves, surrender or be destroyed. You have 24 hours to decide." The message ended. The galaxy exploded with shock and confusion. Humanity was supposed to be gone, dead, forgotten. How were they here? How did they have ships that could destroy 3 military bases without being detected? The Saurian response came within hours. They called humanity's return an act of war, promised complete destruction, and mobilized their fleets. They sent 600 warships to hunt down and eliminate the human forces. They never found them. Captain Nina Brooks commanded the carrier Vengeance from her position on the bridge. Her ship carried 200 fighters, each one piloted by men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The pilots were enhanced, their reflexes improved through genetic optimization, their minds connected directly to their ships through neural interfaces. Enemy fleet approaching, her tactical officer reported. 600 ships, standard formation. Nina smiled. The Saurians fought the way they always had, with the tactics they had always used. They assumed humanity would do the same. They were wrong. Launch all fighters, Nina ordered. Execute Plan Baker 7. The fighters streamed from the Vengeance like angry insects. They moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully coordinated through their neural links. The Saurian fleet opened fire, their weapons tracking the fighters with predictable algorithms. The human fighters dodged effortlessly. They moved too fast, turned too sharply, anticipated every shot before it was fired, and then they struck back. The weapons they carried did not produce energy signatures that the Saurians could detect. The missiles were invisible to conventional sensors. By the time the enemy realized they were under attack, half their fleet was already destroyed. The rest tried to retreat, but the human fighters pursued them relentlessly. 3 hours later, 600 Saurian ships had been reduced to wreckage floating in space. Not a single human fighter had been lost. News of the battle spread fast. Species across the galaxy watched in shock as humanity demonstrated technology and tactics far beyond anything the Council possessed. The Saurians sent more fleets. Those fleets were destroyed too. Every battle ended the same way. Complete human victory with minimal losses. But humanity did not just destroy. Wherever they struck, they left behind supplies, medicine, and communication devices. Ambassador Sophie Grant led teams that contacted every oppressed species, offering alliance and friendship, not conquest. We remember what it was like to be cast out, Sophie told the leaders of a dozen species in a secret meeting. We will not do to you what was done to us. Join us and we will free your people. Stand with us and we will build a better galaxy together. One by one, species began to defect from the Council. They provided intelligence, opened their planets to human forces, and joined the fight against Saurian oppression. The liberation snowballed. Commodore Eric Stone led rapid strike forces that hit supply lines and communication hubs. His ships were smaller and faster than the capital ships, perfect for raids that left the enemy confused and off balance. He struck at night, destroyed his targets, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The key is speed, Eric explained to his captains. We do not give them time to think, time to plan, time to react. We are everywhere and nowhere. We are the nightmare they cannot wake up from. The liberation of Talis IV became a turning point. The Talesian people had been enslaved for over 2 centuries, forced to mine resources and serve Saurian masters. When Terran Marines landed on the planet, led by Captain Nina Brooks herself, the Talesians could not believe what they were seeing. An old Talesian woman approached Nina in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful crystal city. The woman was thin and tired, her face lined with decades of suffering. But when she recognized the human uniform, she began to cry. You came back, the old woman whispered. We never forgot you. We told our children stories about the humans who saved us. We prayed you would return. Nina helped the woman to her feet. We never forgot you either. And we are sorry it took so long. The reunions were broadcast across the galaxy. Species that had been neutral suddenly reconsidered. If humanity was willing to fight for people they had not seen in 3 centuries, what did that say about them? What did that say about the Saurians who had claimed humans were too dangerous to exist? But not everything was noble. In the ruins of an old human colony, Terran forces discovered what the Saurians had done after the exile. Museums had been destroyed, monuments torn down, and historical sites erased. It was a deliberate attempt to remove humanity from galactic memory. Some human soldiers wanted revenge. They wanted to do to Saurian worlds what had been done to human ones. Admiral Torres had to personally intervene to stop a captain from bombarding a Saurian city. We are better than them, Torres said, his voice hard as steel. We do not murder civilians. We do not destroy culture. We fight military targets and we protect the innocent. That is what separates us from them. That is why we will win." The captain backed down, but the incident reminded everyone that revenge was a dangerous motivation. They had to be careful not to become the monsters the Council had feared. The Saurian High Command, now operating from their homeworld of Draktor, issued ultimatum after ultimatum. They threatened to destroy human-friendly worlds. They promised to fight to the last soldier. They called humanity every insult they could think of. Torres responded with a simple message broadcast on every frequency. "You exiled us for being dangerous. You were right. But unlike you, we remember what justice means. Surrender your corrupt leaders. Accept a new galactic order based on equality. Or watch as your empire falls." The Saurians refused. They fortified their core worlds and prepared for a final stand. They had thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, and the belief that humanity could not possibly defeat them in their own territory. They were wrong about that too. As the Terran fleet advanced toward the core worlds, Commander Luke Harrison led a different mission. He commanded a joint task force, a fleet made up of human ships and vessels from a dozen freed species. Their target was not the Saurians, but the Devourers, the hive mind threat advancing from the galactic rim. "We cannot liberate the galaxy only to watch it consumed," Harrison explained to his mixed crew. "We fight on two fronts. We save everyone, not just ourselves." The joint task force moved toward the dark sectors where the Devourers had been advancing. Behind them, the main fleet prepared for the final battle against the Saurian homeworld. The war was reaching its climax, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. President Kyle Anderson stood before the gathered leaders of the Terran Commonwealth. The room was filled with admirals, senators, scientists, and diplomats. Every one of them waited to hear what he would say. Outside the windows, the planet Draktor hung in space like a green jewel. It was the Saurian homeworld, and it was surrounded by the most powerful fleet humanity had ever assembled. "We can destroy them," Kyle said simply. "Our weapons could crack that planet like an egg. We could end the Saurian species in an afternoon. The question is whether we should." Admiral Torres, now very old and needing help to stand, raised his hand. "If I may speak, sir?" "Please." Torres's voice was weaker than it had been, but it still carried authority. "I have spent my entire life preparing for revenge. My grandfather died dreaming of this moment. My father died training soldiers for this moment. I have lived to see it, and now that I am here I realize that revenge is not what we need." He paused, taking a breath. "If we destroy them, we prove they were right to fear us. We become the monsters they claimed we were. But if we show mercy, if we demand justice instead of blood, we prove that 3 centuries of exile made us better, not worse." There was silence in the room. Then Ambassador Sophie Grant spoke up. "I agree. We have freed dozens of species. We have shown them that humanity keeps its promises. If we slaughter the Saurians now, what message does that send?" "It sends the message that actions have consequences," said a voice from the back. It was Captain Nina Brooks. "They exiled us. They enslaved our friends. They tried to erase us from history. They should pay for that." Kyle nodded. "Both arguments have merit. We will put it to a vote. But first I want to show you something." He activated a screen that showed live footage from Draktor's surface. The cities were crowded with civilians, Saurian families going about their daily lives. Children played in parks. Parents worked in offices. Most of them had nothing to do with the decisions their government had made. "These people are not our enemies," Kyle said. "Their leaders are. And I think we can separate the two." He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to Draktor. Full broadcast. I want every Saurian to hear this." The officer worked quickly. Within seconds, Kyle's face appeared on every screen across the Saurian homeworld. In the capital city, in small villages, in orbital stations, millions of Saurians stopped what they were doing to listen. "People of Draktor," Kyle began. "I am President Kyle Anderson of the Terran Commonwealth. For 3 centuries, your government has told you that humanity was dangerous, that we were destroyed, that we were forgotten. They lied. We survived. We grew stronger. And now we have returned. Your military is defeated. Your empire has fallen. Your leaders have brought you to the edge of annihilation. But we offer you a choice. Surrender the corrupt council members who orchestrated humanity's exile. Accept a new galactic order based on equality and justice. Embrace peace. Do this and your people will live. Your world will be spared. Your species will have a future. Refuse and we will take what we want by force. You have 24 hours to decide. The broadcast ended. On Draktor's surface, chaos erupted. The Saurian people, who had lived under oppression for centuries, suddenly realized they had a choice. Their leaders had brought them to this moment, and their leaders would sacrifice them all rather than surrender power. The revolution started in the industrial districts. Workers who had been treated like slaves by their own government rose up. They marched through the streets demanding that the council members be arrested. The government sent soldiers to stop them, but many soldiers joined the revolution instead. Within 12 hours, the Saurian government had collapsed. Vexthor, the same reptilian who had prosecuted humanity 3 centuries ago, was arrested by his own people. The council members who had supported the exile were dragged from their mansions and thrown in prison. The Saurian people themselves demanded justice. Kyle watched the revolution from his command ship. They did it themselves. They chose peace. And now? Asked Torres. Now we make sure peace lasts. Ambassador Sophie Grant led the negotiations for the new galactic government. Representatives from over 100 species gathered in orbit around a neutral world. The old council chambers had been destroyed, a symbolic end to the corrupt system. In its place, they built a new station called Unity Prime. The negotiations took months. Every species wanted a voice. Every grievance needed to be addressed. But slowly, carefully, they built something new. It was called the Galactic Assembly, and it was based on principles humanity had learned during their long exile: equality, justice, and the rule of law. Every species had equal representation. No species could be exiled or oppressed. Technologies would be shared freely. Military forces would be used only for defense. And most importantly, the assembly would be monitored by an independent council that included humans, Talesians, and members from species that had suffered under the old regime. But the biggest challenge was not political. It was the Devourers. Commander Luke Harrison returned from the Galactic Rim with news that was both terrible and hopeful. The Devourers had consumed 17 star systems, but Harrison's Joint Task Force had managed to communicate with them. They are not monsters, Luke explained to the assembly. They are a hive mind, yes, but that does not make them evil. They consume because they did not understand that the species they were destroying were intelligent. No one ever tried to talk to them. No one tried to understand them. And now? Kyle asked. Now we have established first contact. They have agreed to stop their advance. They want to learn about us. They want to join the community. It turns out that diversity of thought is valuable to them. They find our individual consciousness fascinating. It was the most unexpected outcome. The great threat that had terrified the old council became an ally through simple communication and understanding. It was a lesson the galaxy would not forget. 6 months after the war ended, Admiral Torres attended the signing of the new charter. It took place aboard Unity Prime, in a chamber designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Torres was in a wheelchair now, his body finally giving out after a lifetime of service. But his mind was sharp and his eyes were clear. A young Talesian officer stood beside him. Her name was Kira, and she had been just a child when human Marines liberated her world. Now she served in the Joint Defense Force, wearing a uniform that combined human and Talesian designs. Was it worth it? Kira asked softly. The centuries of exile, the war, all the sacrifice? Torres thought about the question. He thought about his grandfather, who had watched humanity being exiled and had sworn revenge. He thought about his father, who had spent his life building ships in secret. He thought about his own decades of planning and preparation. We did not deserve exile, he said finally, but perhaps the galaxy needed to see what humans could become when we have a common purpose. Not conquerors, not saviors, just people who remember what it is like to be cast out and who will not let it happen to anyone else. Kira smiled. You did more than survive. You changed everything. We all did, Torres corrected. Human, Talesian, and dozens of other species working together. That is the real victory. The signing ceremony began. Representatives from every species stepped forward to add their mark to the new charter. When it was humanity's turn, Kyle Anderson signed with a pen that had been made from metal salvaged from one of the old colony ships, the ones that had brought humans home during the exile. As the ceremony ended and species began to mingle and celebrate, Torres watched from his wheelchair. Ships from dozens of different species floated outside the station's windows. Human vessels flew alongside Talesian ones. Saurian ships worked with species they had once oppressed, and even the Devourers had sent a representative, a small probe that carried their consciousness. The galaxy had been broken. Humanity had been exiled. But from that injustice, something better had emerged. Not perfect, not without problems, but better than what had existed before. President Kyle Anderson gave a speech that was broadcast across the galaxy. Billions watched as he stood before a memorial that listed the names of every human who had died during the exile years. "We were exiled because they feared what we might become," Kyle said to the assembled crowd. "They were right to fear us, but wrong about what we would become. We became better than they imagined and better than we were. We became a species that values justice over revenge, that chooses mercy over cruelty, and that remembers both the pain of exile and the joy of homecoming. May we never forget either lesson." The memorial was permanent, a reminder of the past, but around it the future was being built. Human children played with Talesian children. Scientists from a dozen species worked together on new technologies. Soldiers from former enemy species trained side by side. Far from Earth, in the dark reaches of unexplored space, a new exploratory vessel prepared to launch. It was called the Pioneer, and its crew was mixed. Humans, Talesians, Saurians, and representatives from 10 other species. Their mission was to explore the unknown, to find new worlds, to make first contact with species not yet discovered. On the bridge, the human captain worked alongside an alien first officer. Together, they studied the star charts and planned their route. Outside,